I am Hattie. I am 58 years old. I have spent 30 years as a nurse, 20 of those as a single mother, and the last 15 working nights caring for the elderly at Sunset Meadows Care Home. I always thought this hard work was to build something, a house, a small savings that would eventually belong to my son David. But all that faith shattered one rainy Friday night when my body finally said no after an 11-hour shift, and the phone I held just stayed silent. Before I tell you about the one call that changed everything, I am curious about you. Where are you listening to this from? Is it after a long day of your own, or in the quiet of the early morning? Let me know down below, and if you want to see how an ordinary woman found her strength again, please hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey. The smell of Sunset Meadows at 2 in the morning is a particular one. It is not a bad smell, not to me. It is a mix of lemony floor cleaner, the soft, powdery scent of laundry, and underneath it all, the gentle, papery smell of old skin and worn-out books. For 15 years, that smell has been my world from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. My feet know every worn spot on the linoleum floors between room 112, where Mr. Delaney needs his oxygen checked, and room 108, where Evelyn always wants a sip of water and 5 minutes of talk. Evelyn is 92. Her hands are like maps of blue rivers, and her mind is sharp as a tack. She outlived 2 husbands, and as she likes to tell me, one ungrateful son and one who wasn't so bad. I bring her a little custard cup from the kitchen, sometimes the kind she likes. Last week she held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "How's that boy of yours, Hattie?" she asked, her eyes clouded with cataracts but full of knowing. "He treating you right?" I squeezed her hand back. "He's fine, Evelyn. Busy. You know how it is." I said it automatically the way I always did. David was my only child. His father left when he was 4, a decision delivered with a note on the kitchen table and the sound of a car engine fading for good. I worked double shifts as a floor nurse at the county hospital back then, stitching our lives together with overtime and coupons, and a kind of desperate hope. I put him through state college, watching him walk across that stage with a business degree, my heart so full I thought it would burst. That was my pride, my monument. Now David is 35. He lives in a nice subdivision 25 miles away with his wife Chloe. He sells financial software. He drives a nice car. And my role, it seemed, had quietly shifted from mother to a kind of support staff. Every other Sunday I would drive to his house with a ceramic dish of chicken pot pie or a freshly baked coffee cake. I would fix the sticky drawer on his entertainment center because he just hadn't had a minute, or recaulk the edge of the bathtub while Chloe watched, sipping her sparkling water, saying, "Oh, Hattie, you're a lifesaver." Chloe is 32. She calls herself a content creator. Her life, as presented on her social media, is a series of beautifully filtered moments, artisanal sourdough curated fall decor, blessed. I am sometimes in the background of these photos, a blurry figure arranging flowers or carrying a plate. The captions never named me, just vague sentiments like "family helping family" or "so grateful for these moments." I used to feel a flicker of pride at being included. Now I think I was just part of the set dressing. The signs were there, little paper cuts on my heart if I had let myself feel them. 6 months ago, I slipped on a wet patch in the grocery store parking lot and twisted my ankle badly. It swelled up like a purple grapefruit. I called David, the pain making my voice tight. "Honey, I think I need to go to urgent care. Can you come?" There was a long pause, the sound of typing in the background. "Mom, I'm in the middle of a huge client proposal. It's due in 2 hours. Can you call Jerry?" Jerry is my work friend, my real friend. Geraldine. She's 62, has hips that give her trouble, and a laugh that sounds like rocks tumbling in a can. She did come. She took me to the clinic, waited while they x-rayed me, and brought me home with an ice pack and a prescription. David called that night. "You good, Mom? Sorry about that. Work is crazy." Chloe posted a story that evening. It was a selfie of her pouting at the camera with a text overlay that read, "When life gives you lemons, but you're just too swamped to make lemonade." Adulting, overwhelmed. I stared at it on my phone, my throbbing ankle propped up, wondering if the lemon was me. But you push those thoughts away. You tell yourself he's building his life, he's under pressure. You focus on what you're building for him. My little house, a 3-bedroom ranch with a crabapple tree in the front yard, was paid off last year. I have a modest retirement account, and my mother's diamond ring, a simple solitaire in a velvet box at the back of my sock drawer. These things in my mind were not really mine. They were my love solidified. They were David's future, my final act of motherhood. That belief was the fuel that kept me going through the endless nights at Sunset Meadows. The week it happened was what we call a perfect storm in healthcare. A nasty flu strain ripped through Sunset Meadows. Half the staff was out sick. The remaining ones, like me and Jerry, were working brutal back-to-back shifts, mandatory overtime. I worked a day shift, went home for 4 hours of fitful sleep, and came back for a night shift. I did this for 3 days in a row. My body was a collection of complaints, a deep ache in my lower back, a headache that sat right behind my eyes, a tremor in my hands that I tried to hide. That final Friday night, I was supposed to work my regular 10-hour shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. At 5 p.m., the charge nurse, a young woman named Maya, with permanent dark circles under her eyes, caught me as I was clocking in. "Hattie," she said, her voice frayed. "Janet just called in. Her kid spiked a fever of 104. Can you please stay until 7 a.m.? I have nobody else." I looked at her exhausted face. I thought of the residents, confused and vulnerable. I thought, what's one more hour? I said yes. Those extra hours were a slow-motion nightmare. At 2 a.m., Mrs. Rosen in 114 had a respiratory panic attack, convinced she couldn't breathe. Calming her down took 40 minutes of soft talking and holding her hand while my own heart raced. At 4 a.m., I had to help 2 nursing assistants turn Mr. Henderson, a man who weighed over 200 pounds, to prevent bed sores. My back screamed in protest. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed like angry insects, their glare etching itself into my skull. By 5:30 a.m., the world had taken on a fuzzy underwater quality. Sounds were muffled. My vision kept tunneling, then swimming back. I was charting at the nurse's station, my handwriting a shaky scrawl. I remember thinking I just needed some water. I pushed back from the desk, the chair rolling away with a squeak. I stood up, and then the floor wasn't there. It wasn't a dramatic faint. It was a total systems failure. My legs simply dissolved. The humming from the lights became a roar, and then it was replaced by a high-pitched ringing. The last thing I saw was the sharp corner of the lower cabinet on the nurse's station rushing toward my temple. There was no time for fear, just a vague sense of, oh, then blackness. I came to in fragments. Sirens, a blurry face that was Jerry's saying my name over and over. The feeling of a hard stretcher beneath me. The cold night air on my face. I tried to speak, but my tongue was thick. "Hattie, can you hear me?" "You fell. Ambulance is here. It's okay," Jerry was saying, her hand gripping mine. "David," I managed to croak out. It was my first coherent thought. My son. "I'll call him," Jerry said, her voice tight. "Just relax." In the ambulance, the EMT, a young man with kind eyes, shone a light into mine. The world was a nauseating carousel. I heard Jerry on her phone, her voice rising with frustration. "David, it's Jerry. Your mother collapsed at work. She's on her way to Memorial. You need to come." A pause. "David, did you hear me?" Another longer pause. "Fine. I left a message. Get there as soon as you can." She hung up and looked at me, trying to mask her anger with a soothing expression. "He didn't pick up. I left a message. He'll come." At the emergency room, it was a whirl of questions. An IV, a CT scan for my head. The diagnosis was severe exhaustion, dehydration, and a mild concussion from where my head hit the cabinet. They wanted to observe me for a few hours. Jerry never left my side, fetching me water, talking to the doctors. She had called my boss to tell them what happened. The clock on the wall ticked past 7 a.m., then 8. The sun came up, pale light filtering through the blinds. The hospital woke up around us, the sounds of breakfast carts and shifting shifts. David never came. Jerry made excuses, her voice growing quieter with each one. "Traffic is awful this time of day. Maybe his phone died. You know how hard he sleeps." I nodded, clinging to her excuses like life rafts. The alternative that he knew and chose not to come was a void I couldn't look into. Not yet. Jerry drove me home in the late morning. I had a prescription for the headache and stern instructions to rest for at least 3 days. My head throbbed in time with my heartbeat. The world felt too bright, too loud. Jerry helped me into my house, made me tea, and fussed around straightening things that didn't need straightening. I could see the worry etched deep in her face, a worry that went beyond my physical state. "Hattie," she said finally, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. She placed her phone on the table between us. "You need to see something. I don't want to show you, but I think you have to know." My stomach, already unsettled, clenched. "What is it?" She swiped and tapped it on her screen, her mouth a thin line. She turned it to face me. It was Chloe's social media profile. There was a cascade of posts from last night. The first was a picture of their living room, lit with trendy amber lamps. A half-empty bottle of wine and several glasses were on the coffee table. The timestamp was 9:14 p.m. That was right around the time I was in the ambulance. Another post at 10:30 p.m., a close-up of a board game, Settlers of Catan, with hands moving pieces. David's hand was there. I recognized his watch, the one I gave him for his 30th birthday. The final post at 11:47 p.m., a group selfie. David had his arm around Chloe, both of them grinning, cheeks flushed. Two other couples were squeezed into the frame, all laughing. Chloe's caption was like a physical blow. "Chill night with his besties. When life gives you lemons, make margaritas. So grateful for my tribe. Self-care. Weekend vibes. Family is everything. Blessed." The hashtags burned into my retinas. Family's everything. I stared at the screen. The cheerful faces, the celebratory mood, the timestamps lining up exactly with the worst, most frightening hours of my life. While I was unconscious on a floor being loaded into an ambulance, while I was in a hospital bed being scanned for brain injury, my son and his wife were hosting a game night. They were laughing. They were making margaritas. And she had posted about it. She had used the phrase, "family is everything." A coldness spread from my core outward, numbing the pain in my head. It was a clarity so sharp it was painful. This wasn't just neglect. This was a performance. My emergency was an inconvenient plot twist in their perfectly curated narrative, one they simply edited out. I was not a person to them in that moment. I was an obligation they had successfully muted. I didn't cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It was a hollowing out. Jerry gently took the phone back. "I'm so sorry, Hattie." My own phone, charging on the counter, buzzed. It was David. I picked it up with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Mom?" "Hey." Jerry left me a wild message. "You okay?" His voice was casual, slightly distracted. I could hear the television in the background. "Where were you, David?" My voice was flat, eerily calm. "Last night, we had some people over. It got kinda loud. I must have missed the call. What happened? Jerry said you fell." "I collapsed, David, at work. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I have a concussion." "Whoa, serious, but you're okay now, right? You've always been tough. Probably just overdid it. You gotta take it easy, Mom." "Just overdid it. Take it easy." The platitudes rolled off him, empty and effortless. There was no, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." No, "I'm coming over right now." No urgency, no fear. Just a mild inconvenience to be acknowledged and dismissed. In the background, I heard Chloe's voice, tinny and distant. "Is that your mom? Tell her I hope she feels better." It was followed by a light, airy laugh. That laugh was the final seal on the truth. It was all a joke to them. My life, my work, my exhaustion, my fear. It was a minor, slightly embarrassing footnote. "I'm tired, David. I need to sleep." I ended the call before he could say anything else. I looked at Jerry. The kindness and pity in her eyes were almost too much to bear. "They were having a party." I said the words tasting like ash. The next few days passed in a strange, numb haze. Jerry checked on me constantly, bringing soup and groceries. I slept a lot, but it wasn't restful. My dreams were full of falling, of the sound of laughter echoing down long hospital corridors. David called once more 2 days after. A perfunctory check-in. "You good, Mom? Need anything?" I told him I was fine, that Jerry was helping. He seemed relieved to be off the hook. "Okay, good. Talk soon." Click. The silence in my house, which had always been a comforting presence, now felt accusing. Every corner held a memory tied to David. The faint pencil marks on the doorframe charting his growth. The worn spot on the sofa where he used to sprawl as a teenager. The crabapple tree we planted together when he was 10. I had poured myself into this place, into creating a stable home for him, a tangible anchor. And I had assumed it would be his anchor one day, too. Now the thought of him inheriting this house, my mother's ring, the small security I had scraped together, it felt like a profound violation. It would be a reward for indifference. It would mean my life's work would fund the very lifestyle that considered me an afterthought. I went back to work after a week on light-duty days only. The first person to seek me out was Evelyn. She wheeled herself up to the nurse's station, her eyes sharp. "I heard you had a tumble," she said, not one for sugarcoating. "I did, Evelyn, I'm all right." She studied my face, seeing far more than the fading yellow bruise on my temple. "Your boy come see you." The directness of the question took my breath away. I just shook my head, looking down at the chart in my hands. Evelyn reached out and stilled my hand with hers. Her skin was cool and thin as parchment. Hattie listened to an old woman who's made her share of mistakes. I had 2 sons. One moved to Arizona and calls on Christmas. The other, I gave him everything, the house, the savings, even my good china. He sold the china, mortgaged the house, and left me to rot in a state facility until my niece found me and brought me here. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I changed my will on my 80th birthday, left everything to a scholarship fund for nursing students at the community college. It's named after me. Every year they send me a letter about the young man or woman it helped. That," she said, her eyes glistening, "that makes me smile. Don't leave your smile to people who won't cherish it." Her words didn't just land. They took root. They watered a seed that had been lying dormant in the cold, hollowed-out soil of my heart, a seed of a different kind of legacy. I thought of Alistair Finch. His office was in a dusty, respectable brick building downtown. He had handled my parents' small estate over 20 years ago. He was old-school precise and had kind eyes behind his wire-rimmed glasses. I hadn't seen him since. That afternoon during my lunch break, I sat in my car and called his office. His secretary answered. "Finch and Associates. I'd like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Finch, please. It's Hattie Wilson. It's about my estate." Saying the words out loud made my pulse quicken. This was my first secret, my first step toward a boundary. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday morning. I didn't tell a soul. Not even Jerry. For the first time in decades, I had a plan that was entirely wholly for me. Alistair Finch's office smelled of lemon wood polish and old paper. He looked older, of course his hair whiter, but his handshake was firm, his eyes as keen as ever. "Hattie Wilson," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair. "It's been a long time. I was sorry to hear about your parents. How can I help you?" I didn't launch into legal speak. I just told him the story. The nights at Sunset Meadows, the single motherhood, the hope invested in David, the collapse, the unanswered call, the social media posts, the chilling casualness of my son's response. I spoke plainly without dramatics, but I didn't hide the deep, resonant hurt. He listened without interruption, steepling his fingers. When I finished, he sighed, a sound of weary understanding. "I see," he said quietly. "The emotional betrayal is profound, and you wish to revise your will, I assume." "More than that." I said, the plan forming fully in my mind as I spoke. "I don't just want to disinherit him. That feels reactive. I want to transform what I have into something that actively does good. Something that reflects my life, not his disregard." Mr. Finch leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." "I want to sell my house," I said, the decision solidifying into certainty. "I want to use the proceeds along with a portion of my retirement savings to establish a fund. A crisis fund for geriatric nurses for things like unexpected medical bills, car repairs, emergency childcare. The kind of things that push people like me over the edge." The image of my colleagues, of Jerry, of young Maya with her tired eyes filled my mind. He nodded slowly, a small smile touching his lips. "A Hattie Wilson Emergency Relief Fund for Geriatric Caregivers. We can set it up as a donor-advised fund with the Community Foundation. It would be permanent tax-advantaged." "Yes," I breathed, "that was it exactly. And the house sale proceeds would be the seed capital." He continued making notes. "You would of course need a new place to live." "I've seen the ads for Cedar Ridge," I said. It was a senior apartment complex, not an assisted living facility. Small, clean one-bedroom units with no maintenance, a community room, and a security system. I could rent there. It's affordable, especially once the house is sold. I could actually retire in a few years. And your personal effects, the ring you mentioned. My mother's ring, I said. I'd like to donate it to the State Historical Society, in her name. She loved local history. Let it be in a display case appreciated by people who care about such things, not sitting in a box in someone's dresser who sees it only as a monetary value. Mr. Finch looked at me with something akin to admiration. Hattie, this is a remarkable and thoughtful plan. It takes great courage to redirect a lifetime's assets in this way. It is not an act of spite, it is an act of reclamation. That word reclamation echoed in my soul. That's what this was. I was reclaiming my life's meaning. We worked for over an hour. He drafted the codicils to my will, revoking all previous versions and leaving a symbolic $1 to David to make the intent clear and avoid a challenge. He outlined the steps for establishing the fund. He gave me the name of a reputable, no-nonsense real estate agent he knew. I signed the documents with a hand that was steady. There was no trembling now, only resolve. When I left his office, the autumn sun felt warmer on my face. The weight wasn't gone, but it had shifted. It was no longer the crushing weight of disappointment. It was the solid, manageable weight of a plan. My next call was to the real estate agent Sylvia. I met her at my house the next day. She was a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s. I told her I wanted a quick, fair sale, no fuss. She walked through made notes and suggested a price that made my eyes widen slightly. The market is hot for solid homes in this neighborhood, she said. It'll go fast. I started packing that very evening. Not everything, just the things that truly mattered to me: photo albums, my favorite books, my good mixing bowls, the quilt my grandmother made. I packed them into boxes, labeling them simply, Hattie, keep. I was drawing a line physically and emotionally between my life and the life I had thought I was building for someone else. The house sold in 11 days, a young couple with a baby on the way. They loved the crabapple tree. The closing was scheduled for a month out. I put a deposit down on a sunny ground-floor apartment at Cedar Ridge. Life was moving, propelled by my own quiet determination. The call from David came about 3 weeks after my meeting with the lawyer. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was sorting through a box of old linens. Mom, hey, Chloe's doing this whole heritage recipes series for her channel. She wants your chicken pot pie recipe, the one in the blue ceramic dish. Can you text it to me? I looked around at the half-packed living room. I can't do that right now, David. Why not? His voice had a tinge of the old impatient teenager. Because I'm busy. You could come get it if it's so important. A sigh. Fine. We'll swing by tomorrow after work, around 6. Sure, I said, I'll be here. They arrived not at 6, but at 6:45. I heard David's car door slam, then Chloe's lighter footsteps. I opened the door before they could knock. The sight of them on my porch, David looking vaguely annoyed, Chloe with a bright, performative smile, was like looking at strangers. I saw the man who had chosen a board game over his mother's ambulance ride. I saw the woman who had hashtagged her mockery. The smile froze on Chloe's face as she looked past me into the living room. The stacked boxes, the bare spaces on the walls where pictures had hung, the rolled-up rug in the corner. Whoa, David said, stepping inside, his brow furrowed. What's going on? Are you moving? I am, I said, closing the door and leaning against it. I felt a deep, steady calm. Moving where? Why didn't you tell us? His confusion was turning to a dawning, unpleasant suspicion. I'm moving to Cedar Ridge, the apartments. It's time. I kept my voice even. Cedar Ridge, that's for old people. David blurted out, then had the decency to look slightly ashamed. It's for me, I corrected him gently. And I'm selling the house. The closing is in 2 weeks. The color drained from David's face. You're what? You can't sell this house. This is our house. The words were out before he could stop them, revealing the core belief he'd always held. Chloe found her voice sharp and shrill. You're selling it. But what about all the stuff, the furniture, your mother's things? Her eyes darted around the room, already inventorying, appraising. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the ghost of the little boy I'd read stories to, the teenager I'd driven to endless soccer games. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who viewed me as a fixture, a provider, a future asset. No, David, I said, my voice clear and firm in the quiet room. This is my house. I paid for every shingle, every nail. I scrubbed every floor. I raised you in it. And what you did, or rather what you didn't do when I was in that hospital, showed me exactly how much it and I mean to you. He flinched. Mom, that's not fair. I told you I didn't hear the phone. We had people over. It was one time. It wasn't the not hearing the phone, David, I said, and the sadness in my voice was real, but it didn't weaken me. It was the not coming. It was the not caring. It was your wife posting about margaritas and family is everything while I was getting a CT scan. I looked at Chloe, who had the good grace to look at the floor. You showed me your priorities, and I've decided to act on mine. What's that supposed to mean? David asked, his voice rising in panic. It means the proceeds from this house aren't going to be a windfall for you. They're going to start a fund to help other nurses, people who actually spend their lives caring for others, sometimes to the point of collapse. It will be named for me. My mother's ring is going to the Historical Society. My savings are going to secure my own future in my own apartment. I took a deep breath. I am leaving you exactly what you've given me these past few years, David. Nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. Chloe recovered first, her face twisting from shock into ugly anger. You can't do this. This is spiteful. You're a bitter, lonely old woman trying to punish us. Her words bounced off the new armor I had forged. I'm not bitter, Chloe. I'm free. And this isn't punishment. It's consequence. You made your choices. Now I've made mine. David just stared at me, his mouth agape. The financial shock was clearly hitting him harder than the emotional one. You're cutting me out, your own son. I'm not cutting you out of my life, David, I said, and I meant it. The door is open, but I'm cutting you out of my estate. You are not entitled to my life's work, not anymore. You need to leave now. I have packing to do. For a moment he looked like he might argue, might try to cry or manipulate. But he saw something in my eyes he had never seen before, an unshakable finality. The mother who would always say yes was gone. He turned on his heel, grabbing Chloe's arm. She was still sputtering protests. He pulled her out the door. It closed behind them with a soft, definitive click. I stood there in the half-empty house, my heart pounding not with anxiety, but with a powerful, clean energy. I had said the words. I had drawn the line. For the first time in my life, I had chosen Hattie. The movers came on a crisp, blue-sky Tuesday. Jerry was there bossing them around with a coffee in her hand. My new apartment at Cedar Ridge was small, but the windows faced a small courtyard with a ginkgo tree that was turning a brilliant yellow. Unpacking my Hattie Keep boxes felt like assembling a new, lighter version of myself. A month later, I stood in a conference room at the Community Foundation. Mr. Finch was there along with the director of the foundation, and Jerry had insisted on coming. I wore a simple navy blue dress. On the table was a ceremonial, oversized check made out to the Hattie Wilson Emergency Relief Fund for geriatric caregivers. I didn't give a big speech. I just said, this money represents a lot of night shifts, a lot of sore feet, and a lot of love. I want it to make the path a little easier for the people who walk that same path. When I handed the real check over a smaller legal-sized one, my hand didn't shake. It felt like the most right thing I had ever done. The local paper did a small story. A few weeks later, I received the first grant committee report. The fund had helped a nursing aide named Maria pay for her car's new transmission so she could get to work. It had covered a hotel room for a night nurse named Ben, whose apartment had a small fire. Reading those brief summaries, I felt a joy so deep it brought quiet tears to my eyes. This was my legacy, living, breathing, helping. David called a few times after the confrontation. The calls were strained. Sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, sometimes just awkward. I answered. I listened. I was polite. But I held my ground with a calm firmness that seemed to disarm him. The guilt trips no longer worked. The financial arguments fell on deaf ears. I had removed the lever he had always subconsciously pulled. Our relationship, what was left of it, was now on entirely new and unfamiliar terrain where I was no longer the giver and he was no longer the entitled receiver. It was uncomfortable, sad, but it was honest. I still work at Sunset Meadows, but only part-time days. I have time now. Time to have coffee with Jerry. Time to join the book club at Cedar Ridge where we argue good-naturedly about mysteries. Time to sit with Evelyn and listen to her stories, truly listen without being half dead from exhaustion. Sitting here now looking out at the ginkgo tree, I understand something. Love is not a debt to be paid. And sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself isn't about holding on, but about letting go. letting go of the burdens, the wrong expectations, and giving what you have to a future you believe in. My story isn't about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's about realizing that your worth is not defined by what you can provide for others, but by the life you build for yourself on your own terms. So I want to ask you, is there something you're holding on to? Not because it brings you joy, but because you feel you should. A relationship, a duty, a dream that was never yours. Listen to that quiet voice inside. It knows the way, even if the path seems lonely at the start. It's never too late to choose yourself. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you in your own journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found strength in my story, please give this video a like. It helps others find it too. And if you want to join me for more stories about finding courage in everyday life, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. Thank you for listening to my story. Wishing you peace and the courage to build a life that feels truly your own.